we're going to look at how to process data for our criterion C, strand number 1. So we were unpacking criterion C, and we'll need to process this data, create graphs and other things like that. So that's what this video is about. Okay, so first off, I've got a table of data here that was created. And to start, just to keep things organized, I'm going to rename this to raw data. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new sheet for processed data. Okay, I'm going to grab all this data, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it here. Right, the next thing we're going to do is we do need to, for lack of a better word, process this data. So we're going to calculate the average. So I'm going to type that in first, average. And we're going to average out the 3 trials right here. And we will do something different with the equilibrium a little bit later. So just to help you guys out visually, I'm going to add a little bit of color to this. So we're going to deal with this stuff in blue a little bit later. Okay, so to calculate the average, click on one of these boxes. I usually start with the top one. I hit equals, and then type average, open round bracket. And then what you can do is you can drag your cursor over the data that you want to average. And then we hit enter. Okay, and we can repeat that, equals average, open bracket, drag and fill, enter. Now there is actually a shortcut to that. If you go back to any formula that you've already created, you can use this little trick to add more data in. Okay, so on the bottom right hand corner here, there is a blue box or square. We can hold on to that and drag that down. And what it's essentially done is it's calculate the average for all the other rows as well, for 7, 8, 9, 10, all those rubber bands. Now something else we'll also need to calculate. This is the average distance. So this wasn't very well labeled, but I'm going to add a little label here. This is the distance Barbie has fallen. I'm going to center that just to make it look a bit nicer. So this is the average of that. Okay, so I should probably label that average distance Barbie falls. Okay. Now the equilibrium position, if you remember, it's that position that Barbie bounces up from. Okay, so this is actually not only the average distance, but it's the average maximum distance that Barbie falls. So you can add that here. Maximum distance Barbie has fallen. And this is the average of that. What we're going to do next is we're going to subtract these two values. So we're going to call this the difference between equilibrium and max distance. Right, so I'm going to subtract these, and so I don't need to pull out a calculator. I've got a spreadsheet, so I'm going to hit equals, and I'm going to take this value, just click on it, minus, so press the minus sign, then click on the other value. So F3 in orange minus E3 in purple. Hit enter. Now just like before, we can use that shortcut, the fill option, okay, and we've calculated all the differences. Right, so next up, now that we've done all this, this makes a really nice table of data. I would just add a little bit of a few borders here to make that look a little bit nicer. Okay, this is our final data, so I might just color that differently. And this is our independent variable. Oh, I'm definitely going to give that a very different color. Let's do pink. Okay, so next up, we want to look at data extrapolation. So I'm going to add another sheet. I'm going to copy everything here. So one way to get everything in the spreadsheet is to click on this top left-hand corner, click on it, copy, and paste. Okay, I'm going to call this extrapolation. extrapolation. Okay, so extrapolation is sort of being a little bit like a wizard or a witch. We're trying to predict the future. We're trying to fortune tell something here. But we're doing this in a scientific way because we're doing our prediction based on data that we've collected. So now to get a trend here, this is a little bit different. When we have an increasing trend, 6, 7, 8, 9, you want to grab at least 3 different values, and then we're going to drag and fill that. Okay, if you did that, if you tried to use the same technique before, if you just started in 10 and filled that, you would get a bunch of 10s. Okay, so for these numbers, we need to actually get 3 of them, and we're going to fill all the way down to about 20. Okay, so I got a few extra there, no problem. Okay, now to extrapolate the data, I'm going to equals, and we're going to type in array formula, if I remember correctly. Yep, there it is. And then we're going to do a forecast, open round bracket. Okay, so I like to envision this as a bit of a triangle. So we're going to start down here with the new independent variables we're trying to predict. So I'm going to give this a slightly different color later, just to help you guys see that. Okay, but I'm going to highlight all that, comma, the dependent variable that we're basing that off of, and also the independent variable that gave us those dependent variables. So I'm going to hit enter. And as I said, I'm going to color this just a little bit different, just so you guys can visually see this. I'm going to use a red color here, and we're going to use a slightly lighter green maybe. So maybe this one. Okay, so this data right here and this data over here, these are actually related data now. Okay, so we're extrapolating what the difference between the equilibrium and maximum distance is based on the number of rubber bands. Okay, and one way for us to show this now is I am going to grab all my data. I'm going to do a copy, and I'm going to do a paste special. And we're going to paste special as values only. Now, the data actually looks exactly the same as what I had just done. But what's different now is that these are no longer formulas, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to collapse this. I'm actually going to delete this data right here. Okay, so I've got 2 columns. I've got my independent variable. I've got my dependent variable. I'm going to center that. Right, so we just got 2 columns, and now that it's a little bit easier to see that, I might just use a slightly different color of pink. Okay, so now we see the lighter colors are the extrapolated data, and the darker colors was the original data. I'm going to center that just to make it look a little bit nicer, and I'm also going to have them all have the same number of decimal points using this little trick right here. Oh, that's way too many. Let's go down. So this reduces the number of decimal places. And if you can click on the other one to increase the number of decimal places. So you can try that out for yourself. Okay, that is it. Oh no, wait, we still need to look at graphing. So let's graph this data here. So I'm going to copy and paste everything here. And I'm going to create one more sheet for graphing. Paste. Okay, so we want to graph all of this data right here. So what you can do is you can select everything here. Select all that wonderful data. And we're going to go to, where was the graphs? There it is. Okay. Chart. Okay, so go to Insert, Chart. Okay, and by default, it gives you a bar chart. So we can click on that, and we can look for different types of charts. And we're going to look for a scatter plot. Now, I'm going to scroll down a little bit here under Customize. So in the tab here, click on Customize. and I think it's under series. We should be able to get a line on here. So it's under here. So it's under customize, under series, and we're going to tick the trend line box. Okay, so you can actually see here the first little bit of data was a little bit off, and that's what real data looks like. It should be kind of up and down and a little bit off. Okay, and all the extrapolated data, that was actually made up by the computer, so it looks a lot more perfect. Now, what I would actually do is, if you want to make this look even better, I would actually separate this data out. So I'm going to cut this, Command X, Command V, and I'm going to regraph this data. I'm going to select both things. And this is also our dependent variable, but it's our predicted one, or extrapolated one. Let's use extrapolation. Extrapolated. Okay, so I'm going to select all that. We're going to recreate that graph one more time. So we're going to do another chart. We're going to do a scatter plot. Okay, so now, because I've separated the original data and the predicted data into two different columns, it shows up as two different colors. And I am going to have it do a trend line again. Okay, so now that shows very clearly the different pieces of data that we've got. Right, so I'm going to delete this old data table. And there's our new one. Right? So that's it. Good luck with your lab report, guys.